right, so my name is Louis Essig. I graduated from Grandview Heights in 2009. So I say this every time, but I'm getting old. 2009 feels like yesterday. But it's not, it's 2025. And it's been 26 years since I graduated high school. That sounds insane. I look young though, right? Okay, good. Okay, sweet. So I'm going to share with you my experience with alcohol and drugs and kind of where it took me. This is not a scare tactic. This is not, I'm not trying to strike fear in your heart when I do this. I'm just trying to tell you what happened to me, right? I can't determine what's going to happen to you. I can't determine if you're genetically predisposed to alcoholism or addiction or anything like that. But what I can do is I can share my story, and maybe you'll have a second thought when the time does come, when you go into high school and parties start popping up, because they will. You will be invited to parties, you'll be invited out to drink, you'll be invited to do drugs. I promise you that. I know that sounds crazy, but it's going to happen. You're going to have to make a choice at some point, right? So like I said, I grew up here in Grandview. I am genetically predisposed to addiction. So the first introduction I had to like any kind of educational material on drugs and alcohol was DARE. You guys familiar with DARE? Do you know what that is? So basically they used to come in and they bring this mascot. It was a lion, and they would say, "Just say no." That was their like tagline, "Just say no," right? And that was in fifth grade. They used to do it in fifth grade. And as a fifth grader, I remember thinking to myself after they left, if I abuse alcohol or use drugs, there's going to be immediate consequences. So like if I go out one weekend and have a beer or drink some beers or smoke some weed, I'm going to wake up the next day and my life is going to burn to the ground. And I'm a fifth grader, mind you. So I didn't know any better, right? And it scared me. It legitimately scared me. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do alcohol and drugs. Not going to happen. No way. And I would draw these lines in the sand, right? Like, I'm not going to do this. Not going to do this. Not going to do this. And I kept jumping over the lines. The first party I went to was my sophomore year. And I remember my freshman year in high school, I came in, and that move from 8th grade to freshman year for me, like there was a lot of anxiety around it. Where am I going to fit in? Where am I going to belong? You know, you're going over to the high school. There's going to be older kids over there. It was nerve-wracking, right? My freshman year, I did not touch a drink or a drug, and that was attributed to DARE because I was scared, quite frankly. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't want to ruin my life. Sophomore year rolled around, and is it safe to say that everybody knows everybody's business in Grandview? Is that pretty safe to say? Yeah. So you guys grow up with each other, aside from transfer students, people who come in K through 12. You guys know each other from kindergarten to senior year until you graduate. And I started to watch some of my best friends go out to these parties. And they'd go out and they'd drink some beers, and then maybe they'd smoke some weed, and they'd come back to school Monday and everything was fine. And I was like, wait a second. No, you told me if I did that my life was going to burn to the ground. That's not true. And so I got invited to a party Thanksgiving break sophomore year. I remember it like it was yesterday. I went out, I drank some beers, I smoked some weed, and I came back to school Monday, and it was like instant popularity in my head. That's how it felt, because everybody was like, oh man, Louis, that party was great. That was so much fun, da da da. And I felt like I finally fit in. I finally belonged somewhere. Like it felt like I had found my missing piece, right? But I wanted to take it easy. I didn't want to overdo it and end up with any sort of consequence at all. I didn't want to get kicked off I played golf, didn't want to get kicked off the golf team. I ran track, didn't want to get kicked off the track team. And so I told myself I was going to take it easy. Fast forward to junior year, and I did not take it easy. Everything ramped up. I'm partying more often. I'm drinking. Junior year, probably, I don't want to say every weekend, but pretty darn close. I'm smoking weed probably daily. We have open lunch at Grandview, and the normal kids would go to McDonald's or like Taco Bell or Wendy's or whatever, and I would go smoke weed. I would go get high, and that's what I did. And I'd come back to school, and fortunately for me, I was smart enough to not have to apply myself to get B's, and I was cool with B's. I didn't need an A, didn't feel like I needed an A, just needed a B. And I don't know about you guys, but I felt this immense pressure to go to college. Like, you got to go to college, right? That's what you do. You go to college, you get a degree, you graduate, you get a job, you build a family, you get a house, white picket fence, you have kids, the dreams you have, what you want with your life, what do you want to do with your life? And that's what I wanted to do with my life. By senior year, all bets were off. I was drinking sometimes during the week. I remember there was one weekend, and this was my first inkling that I had a problem. I remember one weekend I went and I got a case of beer, and all my buddies couldn't come out and drink with me. So I had my parents' minivan, and I pulled into this church parking lot and sat in the back seat and drank beers. And I remember sitting there drinking these beers by myself as a senior and thinking, like, this probably isn't normal. This is probably not what normal students do or normal kids do. And that is absolutely right. Normal students do not drink beers by themselves in their parents' minivan as a senior. It's just not something that people do. I was introduced to Adderall, and just to educate you guys a little bit, if you're prescribed Adderall for ADHD, totally fine. But if you buy an Adderall because you have an exam coming up and you want to cram and study, and let's say you pick up an Adderall from your buddy and you're driving down First Avenue and you get pulled over, right? And the cops decide to search your car and they find that single Adderall, maybe it's in your center console. It's a felony drug possession charge. One Adderall that's not in your name. Same goes for a Percocet, a Vicodin, anything like that, weed, which is legal now. But you can catch a felony possession off of one pill. And felonies will change your life forever. And I'll get into that. So when it came time to graduate, like I said, I felt this immense pressure to go to college. And I applied to one school and one school only. Does anyone want to take a wild guess at which school? OU, you nailed it. Good job. And I went to OU because it was a party school. And I was like, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to party. They have that Halloween party. Excellent. This is what I'm going to do. And that was the plan, to go to OU, party, graduate, get that house, get that family, have kids. And that is not how it went at all. In between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, I was introduced to painkillers. It was Oxycontin back then. I don't know if you guys have seen documentaries on Netflix or Hulu or Prime. They're all over streaming apps. But I was introduced to Oxycontin, and I remember doing it, and the feeling that it gave me, it took me out of myself completely. Shut my brain down. I didn't have any negative thoughts. It was perfect. I felt like it was perfect, but I didn't know that you could become physically dependent on a drug like that. I'm an 18-year-old. I had no idea. And I picked up an Oxycontin habit just like that. And I had the means to do so. And when I say just like that, I mean, I used it once and I used it every single day the entire summer. By the end of summer, I went down to OU, and I remember I didn't bring my pills with me one weekend, and I couldn't sleep one night, and I felt sick. And I was like, why am I feeling sick? Do I have the flu? Do I have a bug? What's the deal? And come to find out, it was the painkillers. My body was detoxing from the painkillers. So what I started to do was I'd come home to Columbus every single weekend. My girlfriend would come down, she'd pick me up, I'd come home, I'd get what I needed, I'd go back to OU so that I wouldn't have to be sick during the school week, basically, so I could make it to my classes. Because withdrawals are, the way I describe it is like the flu times 100. Add a little depression and anxiety, it's awful. It is an awful experience. After OU was quarterly back then, after 2 quarters, I dropped out of college. I called my dad. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was bawling my eyes out because I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it through college. And I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I can't do this. You know, and part of it was I wanted to come home to Columbus where the drugs were. And the other part was I just felt like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do college. And I came back home, got a job at Five Guys over on Fifth Avenue. I actually helped open that Five Guys. That's how long ago that was. And I was flipping burgers and living with my girlfriend. And I got that job to keep my dad off my back. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to college, but I'm working, right? I'm working. Mind you, the entire time I'm still smoking weed, I'm still doing painkillers, I'm still drinking, I'm still putting anything I could find in my body to take me out of myself. And this is when major consequences started to roll in. You can flip to the next slide. So this is high school. You can see I got the Bieber haircut going on right here. I think this was freshman year, sophomore year. There's my senior prom picture. And I put these pictures up here. I mean, guys, I look like a normal kid. I'm just a normal kid, right? Just like you. I sat in these chairs. And this was my junior prom, senior prom. And I just want you guys to understand I'm just like you. I was just like you. I had no idea that I was genetically predisposed to alcoholism. Around 2012, 2013, Purdue Pharma, who created OxyContin, changed the formula so you couldn't abuse the pills. And when that happened, heroin flooded the streets. I mean, it was like overnight, heroin just appeared. And I remember I was at work one day and I was sick. And I was dope sick. I was going through withdrawals and I was flipping burgers over the grill. It was miserable. And one of my coworkers was like, well, hey, I can get you something that will make you feel better. And I was like, okay, do it, because I feel terrible right now. And he, runs out back to the parking lot, comes back in, and he brings me in a bag of heroin. And to be honest, I didn't care. I was sick. I needed to feel better so I could do my job. And I went into the bathroom, I locked the door, and I did a line of heroin on the baby changing station. And I share that story with you because, A, that's not what normal people do. They don't, on the clock at their job, go in the bathroom and do heroin. That's not what normal people do. Secondly, it gives you a good idea of kind of the complete and total disregard I had for my own life. Because what if I'd overdosed in that bathroom with the door locked? Probably not standing here in front of you today, right? I'm probably dead. But that's what I did. And as soon as I picked up heroin, you want to talk about a toilet boy spiral, my life just went downhill so fast. I got fired. This was my girlfriend at the time that I was moved in with. She kicked me out. Moved back home with mom and dad. And at like 22, 23 years old, moving back home with mom and dad after dropping out of college and getting fired from a job is not a good feeling. You feel like a complete and utter failure. I couldn't keep $1 in my pocket. All my meaningful relationships, meaning friends from high school, they wanted nothing to do with me. Lewis wasn't fun anymore. Lewis wasn't the fun party guy anymore. Lewis had a problem, right? But I wasn't really willing to admit it yet. And I mentioned those lines in the sand that I drew. And I said I would never do heroin. What do you think of when you think of a heroin addict? Paint a picture, anybody. Go ahead.
Oh, me? I don't know. Homeless guy?
Yes, homeless guy behind the dumpster, you know what I mean? He's got the shopping cart. That's what you think of. That's the picture that I painted in my head, certainly. And I told myself I would never be that. And here I was doing heroin, living at home with my parents. It wasn't long before I crossed another line in the sand, and I said I would never use a needle. I would never use a needle. And lo and behold, the day came where I started shooting heroin. And I mean, guys, it's a completely normal student kid, and I'm shooting heroin, right? And I wasn't that homeless guy yet. I wasn't that guy behind the dumpster. I was just a kid, right? And my life was miserable. It was totally miserable. Shortly after that, we sold the house in Grandview. We moved out to the west side off of Hague Avenue, which didn't really help my cause because there's a ton of drugs out there. And, I just kept doing what I was doing. And shortly after that, what comes with drug addiction is crime. You start committing crimes to get the money to get the drugs. And so I would go shoplift. I would break into cars. I would rip people off for money. I would steal money from my friends' parents' purses. You name it. If you had it, I wanted to take it from you so that I could get high. And that's just how selfish I was. It was all about Lewis. It was all about Lewis. I had all the answers. And that was my biggest problem, was that I had all the answers. I can quit this anytime I want, right? And I attribute it to like a train. You know how trains get going and it takes them a while to stop? And then when they do stop, they throw it in reverse. It takes a long time for that process to happen. And that's kind of how I looked at heroin. I was like, oh, I'll stop this train eventually and we'll turn this thing around and I'll get a job and we'll be fine. Not what happened. Not at all. The first time I got arrested was by the Grandview police. I got arrested for eluding. So they lit me up and I drove like 4 blocks and they took me to jail for that. And I'm here to share with you guys, the county jail is not a place for people like us. It's not. It was a huge culture shock because growing up in Grandview is a privilege, guys. You guys get a great education. You're in a great neighborhood. You have everything you want and need. I know I did. I didn't want or need for anything as a kid. I had, when Christmas came around, I got gifts. My birthday is December 20th, so I doubled up. Like, I was very well taken care of by my parents. My dad raised me phenomenally. My mom, not so much. But I remember going into county jail and getting put in general population. And I'm in there with guys who are committing like armed robberies, burglaries, people in there I know there was one guy that was in there for like murder for hire, and I'm this kid from Grandview, ending up in the county jail, and I'm scared to death. I'm terrified. I ended up getting bonded out. It was the only time I bonded out. I called mom and dad. They were like, all right, you got one shot. We'll bond you out this time. Happens again. Good luck. And they did. They bonded me out. I got out, and I went straight back to it. I basically just sat in jail, didn't work on myself, didn't do anything, and got out and got high. And this revolving door began where I was just in and out of jail. I'd go in, I'd do 2 weeks. I'd go in, I'd do a month. I'd go in, I'd do 3 months. And jail became normal. And again, that is not something that normal people should have to experience. You shouldn't get booked into jail and say, oh, here we go again. I know how to do this. This is easy. It's not something that normal people do at all, by any means. So eventually I would catch a couple of felonies. I got caught with drugs. I got caught with heroin. I got caught with crack cocaine. I got caught with regular cocaine, and I picked up all these felonies, right? And I remember they got dismissed for future indictment, which means they had to test the drugs to make sure they were real. Once they found out they were real, the indictments come back, and I have to go to court. At this time, my dad kicked me out of the house. He was done. He was done with my shit, excuse my language, but he was finished. And I wish he had done it sooner, honestly, because it's what I needed. I needed that reality check. And I found myself homeless, and I had nothing with the clothes on my back. And I left. I went to this church down the street from my parents' house because I know that I felt that they were gonna, feed me and give me clothes, and they did. They fed me, they gave me clothes, they gave me a sleeping bag. And I went into the woods, this nice wooded area, cleared out a nice little space for myself, laid my sleeping bag out, and I went to bed that first night homeless. And I remember I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it started pouring down rain. Mind you, I don't have a tent. I don't have anything covering me. And I pull this sleeping bag up over my head because it's the only thing I had to shield myself from the rain. And I'm laying there, and I'm just like, how did you get here? The math did not add up. I went to Grandview. I had everything I ever wanted or needed. Very privileged, right? I got to go to college, squandered that away. There's a lot of kids that don't get to go to college, guys, believe it or not. There's a lot of kids that don't get that opportunity in many school districts in Columbus. And I was just laying there like, how are you here right now? Shortly after that, those felonies came back, like I said, and the U.S. Marshals actually came to get me. I was walking down the street, and they pulled up on me in multiple unmarked vehicles, picked me up, back to jail I go. And I go to jail, I sit for 5 months this time. That's quite a while to sit in the county jail. It's a lot of time. And I went to court, and the judge told me that she was going to give me probation, but if I violated it, she was going to send me to prison for the maximum amount of time possible, and that was 5 years. And it scared me to death because I did not want to go to prison. I did not know how prison would change my life. I didn't know what would happen. I mean, I could be a completely different human being right now if I had gone to prison. And I asked my attorney, I said, hey, can you get me some help? And it was the first time that I openly admitted that I had a problem. It was to my attorney. And he got me in this special docket drug court program that basically teaches you how to live. Because as a young adult, I didn't know how to live. I didn't know about credit. I didn't know how to buy a car. I didn't know how to get an apartment. I didn't know how to do anything. And this drug court program taught me how to do all those things. And it also taught me how to get clean. And what that, you guys look at me today and you're like, oh, he's all clean cut. Oh, he looks nice. He's got a nice watch on. He's fine. He turned it around. It's not that easy. It's not that easy at all. I know, I'm going to say 8 to 10 Grandview kids from my grade and above that passed away from drug addiction, overdoses. And they grew up right here in Grandview, sat in the same chairs you're sitting in. And I was just watching people die left and right from heroin overdoses. Shortly after that, I decided I was going to take things seriously. I did give the court a couple of dirty urines. They sent me to a minimum security prison. And that's when I was like, okay, this has to stop. I can't. I give up. I surrender. I have no more answers. I can't get out of this. And I started to pay attention. And it's kind of like when your parents tell you something and you kind of blow them off, like they know because they've got lived experience. You can flip the next slide. So here's a couple of mugshots for you. Here's one from my younger days. You can tell I look, a little younger, okay. Here, not so great. And here you can, I mean, it's almost like the life was sucked out of my soul is like gone. There's nothing behind my eyes. And you can see it clear as day. And so I started taking suggestions from people who were sober. And lo and behold, I start taking these suggestions and my life starts to get better. Now, the problem is I was convicted of 2 felonies and probably a good 12 misdemeanors, petty thefts, small stuff, not really small, but we consider it small stuff. And I remember trying to get my life back on track, right? And so I go to rent an apartment and there's a box and the box says, "Are you a felon?" And I have to check yes. And no one would rent to me. No one would rent an apartment. It got to the point where I would walk in to like look at the apartment and the first question out of my mouth would be, "Do you rent to felons?" And if they say no, I'd shake their hand, I'd walk out the door. And it took me months to find a place to live. And eventually I did find a place to live, and it was this Section 8 housing development out on the west side. And when I tell you it was not a nice place, roaches, bed bugs, terrible place to live. But that's all I had. That's the only person that would rent to me. It's the only way I could get a roof over my head. I went to go get a car, and I had defaulted on my student loans, so my credit was screwed up. So now I'm paying, 25% interest rate on my car, which is extremely high. I don't know if you guys know what interest rates are, but it's a very high interest rate. And that was due to the damage I did when I was out there drinking and using. And, it took me years to rebuild my life. And it started out, I got a job at Donato's Pizza. I was making $7 an hour. And I was stoked that somebody hired me. Because that's another thing. People don't want to hire you with felonies. For some reason, they look at you and they think to themselves, well, I don't know, this is a gamble. I don't want to roll the dice on this kid, right? And they hired me. And like I said, I was making $7 an hour. And I remember after about a year, I went for a management position. And the district manager came in, told him, I'm looking to become a manager. And he was all about it because I was a hard worker. I knew I had a chip on my shoulder. I had to prove myself. I had to prove that I was capable because I had all these strikes against me, right? And they told me I couldn't be a manager at Donato's Pizza because of my felonies. And that blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind that I could not run a pizza shop because of my felonies. I couldn't believe it. And so I chose to leave. And I went and got into the hospitality business. I worked at a hotel, and I ran food and bus tables at La Tavola over across from the library, and Lupo down here on Arlington Avenue. And I remember, again, I got that chip on my shoulder. I'm working hard. I'm working as hard as I can. And eventually I got promoted and I became a server. And, those are nice restaurants. You can make good money waiting tables at those restaurants. And I did. I made good money, and I bought a car and had a place. Eventually I met a girl, moved into a nicer place. And then COVID happened in 2020. And I remember I came in Sunday, and we all had the TV on, and DeWine closed restaurants. And I couldn't believe it. I worked at a hotel and a restaurant, and those are like the 2 worst jobs to have during COVID because you can't go to restaurants anymore, and no one really wanted to go travel. No one wanted to do anything. So I lost my job at the restaurant, which was a huge bummer because I worked really hard to get to that point. And I kept my job at the hotel, but my hours dropped tremendously because there just weren't people traveling. Shortly after that, I went to my judge, the judge who sentenced me to prison. And I said, hey, I'd love to go work at that correctional facility I was incarcerated at. And he said, I'll write you a reference letter if you want to give it a shot. And he did. And I got my reference letter, got my resume, went into this correctional facility, mind you, where I was incarcerated, and they hired me. They hired me at the same facility that I was incarcerated at. And that was a trip, to say the least, because I'm now the police in a sense. I'm now enforcing the rules. I'm no longer an inmate. And I'll tell you right now, I mentioned the privilege over and over, but I saw so many different walks of life. I would see 60-year-olds come through there who had been doing this their entire life, career criminals, I remember one time I would share my story with the inmates. And I remember I was sitting there one day and this kid came in, sat in the front row, and he stopped me. He goes, hey, you from Grandview? I was like, yeah, I'm from Grandview. He goes, yeah, me too. It's a Grandview kid sitting right in front of me in jail, The disease of alcoholism and addiction does not discriminate. It doesn't matter who you are, what your skin color is, what your gender is, how smart you are. In fact, the smarter you are, because, I'm no dummy, I thought I could think my way out of anything. So I'm working at this facility. I'm helping people. Things are going good. My life's getting back on track. And, eventually I would leave that job for a sales gig and I started chasing the dollar, right? I needed to make some money so that I could move up, get a new place, get a new car, the normal things that normal people do, because I could do that now because I'm sober. I heard something early on that really, really stuck with me. And it was that being sober gives you a competitive edge in life. And I don't know about you guys, I like to win. I don't like to lose. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, a competitive edge in life. What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means. So let's say me and my guy right here in the front with the mashup Gatorade, we're both going for a job. And it's a sales gig, right? I've got felonies, multiple felonies. He's got a clean record. He went to college. Say he went to OSU. Okay, he's got a degree, he's doing everything right. He goes in for the interview and he does well. He didn't crush it, but he does well. I'm a sales guy. I go in and I kill it. I kill the interview. Guess who they hire? They hire him because he doesn't have a record, and that's the battle I fought for so many years, We can flip it to the other side of the coin. Say I'm still drinking and using, right? And maybe my interview's on Monday and I go out Sunday night and I decide I'm gonna drink and I'm gonna party. I wake up late the next day, I'm hungover, I'm not prepared for this interview at all. I go in there and bomb. And he goes in, he went to bed early, got up, got his coffee, he's good to go, ready for the interview. Yet again, he gets the job. And that's the reality of society, really. I had so many barriers and roadblocks. Now, what I will tell you is recovery is a beautiful thing. It really does give you a competitive edge in life. I love that I'm clear-minded. I can think, I can speak, I've done things that I never thought I would do. I remember thinking to myself, how can I go on a vacation and sit on the beach and not drink a cocktail, right? How can I do that? That's impossible. And it wasn't, I'd find myself I went to Las Vegas, I went to Miami, didn't have to drink or use. That reservation was gone. And I realized, okay, you can live your life normally now, right? I had a couple of years sober at the time, and I started to understand what it meant to live a normal life and rebuild my credit and get a place and, all those things that you want growing up. I want to remind you guys, when you move into high school, it feels like your entire life. That 4 years feels like 8. I swear it does. It feels like a long time, and it feels like I gotta be popular. I gotta fit in. I gotta be somebody. But if I could go back and do it again, I wish I had been that kid that didn't drink, didn't use, and had studied for his tests and studied for his exams and gone to college and graduated. But I didn't. I chose a completely different route that nearly killed me and definitely ruined my life for a very long period of time. And so I hope you guys understand, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you my experience. I can't determine if you're alcoholic. That's not for me to determine. But think twice. Just think twice when you get invited to a party, because you're going to. It's going to happen. And if it's not already happening, it's going to happen. And, you think about this guy or think about that guy. You want to end up like that? No, you don't. You don't at all. It's an awful way to live. I'm very fortunate, statistically speaking, that I got out, because most people don't. I've watched not just Grandview kids, but people in recovery go back out, relapse, and die. It's a terrible disease. It's a terrible disease. I'm not here to tell you you have it, you don't, but just think twice when you get to high school. You get offered something. Guys, high school is 4 years. And when you graduate, you're all going your separate ways. Everyone's going to college, or someone's going to go, maybe they want to do trade work or whatever the case may be. High school isn't the determining factor. Like, your popularity doesn't determine anything, because when you graduate, it's over. It's gone. You're going to college. You got to meet new friends, meet new people. That's all I have. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Take all of what I said into consideration, and I am a wide open book, so you guys can ask away. And mind you, I can sit silently for as long as you need. So take your time, shoot.
I'll start, Lewis. We only have a couple minutes real quick, but in high school, what do you think the biggest influence was when people started asking you? Was it like wanting to fit in, or curiosity, or just like what was in high school? Because I feel like that's probably like one of the biggest challenges is like sophomore, junior, senior year. When they're getting approached, is it like, oh, I want to see how this makes me feel? Or is it like, oh, my best friend that I've known for 10 years in Grandview is doing it? Like, what was it?
It was a multitude of things. I felt like FOMO,
Yeah.
right? The fear of missing out. All my friends are doing it. They're fine. And there are kids who can drink normally, I'm not one of them. And rolling the dice was not a good idea for me. But yeah, I could blame it on peer pressure, but I think that's a cop-out, because I could have very easily said no. But it was a multitude of all of those things combined that led me to do that. Good question. Come on, guys.
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared.
Ask anything. I'm going to pass this out. This is between me and you, so fill this out, please, on your own time.
Yes, go ahead. Oh, you're just holding the paper up. Yeah.
Are you still in contact? Like, did you ever get back in contact with your parents?
So both my parents are gone. My mom died of an overdose, but she did get to see me get sober, and my dad passed away from cancer 2 years ago. He also got to see me get sober. That's all I can ask for, is to make my parents proud before they went. Good question. Yes?
Did any of your sports coaches notice that you were something was wrong?
I don't recall really any teachers, coaches. Maybe they did. Maybe they did know, maybe they didn't. I don't know, but I know that there was no intervention there at the time. And that's why I come in here today, to educate you guys. Good question. Come on, guys, shoot. Yep.
When were you at your lowest, the worst time?
Probably right here. I was on any and everything you can imagine. The sleeping bag was low. That was really really low because, like I said, I grew up with all this privilege and I'm homeless. I just I didn't wake up one day and say I'm gonna be a junkie when I grow up. I'm gonna be a drug addict when I grow up. No, I went to school for computer science, guys. I'm no dummy. You know what I mean? But I'd say that was my lowest point. Yes.
Would you say that like weed and cannabis was like the worst gateway drug or like
Here's what I'll tell you about my view on weed as a gateway drug. What happens is when you go to buy weed, you end up around people that have other drugs. And so it's not necessarily smoking the weed, but you go to get weed, and then all of a sudden, oh, you want to try these pills? Oh, do you want to try this? Oh, do you want to try that? And that's how I look at weed as a gateway drug. Not necessarily smoking it, but you're putting yourself around people that are using different drugs, and eventually they're going to introduce them to you. And it's up to you to say no. Yes.
What was the worst area for drugs?
Say it again.
What was the worst area for drugs?
Worst area? I got all my drugs in Grandview. Yeah. I got all my drugs in Grandview. Right here.